I should have gone to sleep early that night. I should have ignored the quiet murmurs from the other room and minded my business. But fate had other plans. Lying in bed, half drowsy, I heard my wife, Emily, talking on the phone. Her voice, usually soft and warm when she spoke to me, was now excited, almost breathless. I wouldn't have thought much of it if she hadn't said the one phrase that sent a bullet through my gut. It was my first time trying a Dark Johnson, and I want more. My heart stopped. My ears burned. My mind screamed at me to have misheard her, but there was no mistake. She was giggling like a teenager in love, the kind of laugh she hadn't given me in years. I stayed completely still, my body frozen in a mix of rage and disbelief. My wife, my Emily, was sitting in the living room, whispering filth about another man to her best friend, Michelle. It was amazing, Michelle. I swear, I didn't know I could feel like that. With Josh, it's just, routine. But this? It was raw, real. My name. She had the audacity to say my name like that, like I was a footnote in her life, a placeholder while she found her thrill elsewhere. My fists clenched so tight my knuckles cracked. I wanted to storm into that room and demand answers, but I didn't. No, I needed to know more. And Josh? Michelle asked. Emily scoffed. Oh, please. He has no clue. The man is so trusting, it's pathetic. He'd never suspect me. He thinks I'm an angel. Angel? Angel? I nearly laughed. The rage inside me was white-hot, burning through my veins like fire. But I forced myself to stay calm, my breath slow and deep. This wasn't just cheating. This was mockery. Then came the final nail in the coffin. I'm thinking of bringing it up to him, opening the marriage. I mean, he loves me, right? He'll agree. And if not, well, he doesn't have to know everything. The words hit me harder than a punch to the jaw. She wasn't just betraying me. She was plotting how to keep betraying me while making me a fool to my face. I felt sick. My world cracked open, and everything inside me shattered. That night, I didn't sleep. That night, I made a decision. Emily had no idea, but the game had just changed. The night stretched on, and sleep never came. My mind was a battlefield, rage clashing with heartbreak, betrayal drowning out every rational thought. Every memory with Emily felt like a cruel joke now. Every, I love you, a rehearsed lie. The weight of her words pressed down on my chest, suffocating me. Morning light bled through the curtains, but I didn't move from my spot on the bed. Emily eventually walked in, acting as if nothing had changed. She kissed my cheek, the same lips that had whispered about another man just hours ago. The scent of her perfume, once comforting, now reeked of deception. I clenched my jaw, fighting the urge to shove her away. Not yet. I watched her, every movement, every detail. She hummed while getting dressed, scrolling through her phone with a smirk on her lips. My stomach twisted. Was she texting him? Reliving her night with him in secret while standing in our bedroom? I gripped the sheets so tightly my fingers ached. She left for work, leaving me alone with my thoughts. That was my first mistake, being alone with my thoughts. Because once I was alone, I started noticing everything. The signs had been there all along. The sudden interest in girl nights with Michelle, the way she clutched her phone tighter, turning the screen away from me, the unexplained weekend trips to clear her head, the new lingerie I'd never seen her wear for me. I had been blind, willingly or not, but no more. I pulled myself out of bed and started searching. I needed proof, real proof, something undeniable. Her phone was locked, of course, but her laptop? That was another story. As soon as I opened it, I knew I had struck gold. Emails, messages, photos, conversations so filthy they made my skin crawl. There it was in black and white, my wife detailing every sordid encounter, from the first moment she took a risk to the last time she couldn't get enough. She spoke about him, Darren, like he was some kind of god. She described their moments together in ways she had never once spoken about me. It wasn't just physical. It was admiration. It was desire. It was obsession. The betrayal felt like a fresh wound, cut open again and again with every word I read. And then I saw it. A draft email. Unsent. It was addressed to me. Josh, I've been thinking a lot about us. About what I need. what makes me feel alive. And I've come to realize something. I don't think monogamy is right for me anymore. I love you, but I also love what Darren gives me. I want to open our marriage. I think you'll understand because you love me, right? You wouldn't want to lose me over something so small. Small. Small? The rage that had simmered beneath the surface exploded. I slammed the laptop shut so hard it nearly cracked. My pulse pounded in my ears. This wasn't just a betrayal. It was a plan. A calculated, manipulative plan to twist me into accepting her filth while she continued laughing behind my back. She thought I'd roll over like a good little husband. She thought I'd accept this. She thought I'd understand. She had no idea what was coming. I wasn't going to beg. I wasn't going to confront her like a fool, hoping for honesty from a woman who had none left to give. No, I was going to ruin her. And it would start with the one thing she never expected: silence. When she came home that night, I acted normal. I kissed her like I always did. I listened to her ramble about her day. I watched as she pretended everything was fine, as if she hadn't just shattered our marriage with her selfishness. But while she laughed, I planned. That night, as she slept peacefully beside me, I made my move. I gathered what I needed: important documents, sentimental belongings, anything I couldn't bear to leave behind. Then I grabbed the rest: her clothes, her shoes, her designer bags, every last item that tied her to our home. And I burned them. Out in the backyard, under the cold night sky, I watched as the flames devoured everything. Every expensive dress she wore to impress other men. Every piece of jewelry she flaunted while lying to my face. Every trace of the life she thought she could keep. By the time the sun began to rise, I was gone. And when Emily woke up, she wouldn't find her devoted husband waiting for her. She'd find an empty house. The flames danced in the darkness, devouring every trace of her. Every designer dress she had worn for another man. Every piece of jewelry she had flaunted while whispering lies into my ear. Every gift I had ever given her, now reduced to embers. The scent of burning fabric mixed with the crisp night air, creating a strangely satisfying aroma. The scent of justice. I stood there, watching the fire consume everything, and for the first time in hours, I felt something other than rage. Relief. It was as if I was shedding the last remnants of the life I thought I had. Emily had chosen this path. She had made her decision. Now, I was making mine. By the time the fire had settled into smoldering ash, my plan was fully formed. I wasn't going to just leave her. That would be too easy. I wanted her to feel what I had felt: the betrayal, the humiliation, the cold, gut-wrenching realization that her world had just collapsed. I loaded my car with the only things I truly needed: my essentials, my documents, and my dignity. I left my wedding ring on the nightstand, right beside a single note, written in the cold, calculated words of a man who had nothing left to lose. You wanted an open marriage. Congratulations. You're open, completely alone. I didn't stick around to watch her crumble. That would come later, when the weight of her choices finally crushed her. As I drove away from what used to be my home, a strange calm settled over me. My hands were steady on the wheel, my thoughts clearer than they had been in weeks. I wasn't running. I was reclaiming my life. The first stop was the bank. Joint accounts? Not anymore. I withdrew every last penny that was legally mine, leaving her with nothing but her paycheck and shattered dreams. The second stop was my lawyer's office. The moment I sat across from him and told him I wanted a divorce, the words felt like a battle cry. This wasn't just an end. It was the beginning of my freedom. But Emily? She had no idea what was coming. I booked a hotel for the night, knowing I had to rest before the storm I was about to unleash. Sleep still didn't come easy, but this time, it wasn't because of pain. It was because of anticipation. By morning, my phone was flooded with messages. Emily, 6:47 a.m. Josh? Where are you? Emily, 7:02 a.m. What the hell happened to my stuff? Emily, 7:15 a.m. If this is some kind of joke, it's not funny. Emily, 7:34 a.m. You burned my things? Are you insane? Emily, 7:50 a.m. Answer me right now. I let her panic, let her scream into the void, desperate for control. She was used to having me wrapped around her finger, But that Josh, the fool who worshipped her, he was dead. An hour later, my lawyer called. It's done, he said. She'll be served by noon. Perfect. By the time Emily received those divorce papers, she would realize just how deeply she had screwed up. I checked my phone again. More texts. More desperation. Emily, 9:12 a.m. Josh, please. Let's talk. Emily, 9:35 a.m. Baby, you're scaring me. Where are you? Emily, 9:58 a.m. Please don't do this. We can fix this. I love you. And there it was. The lie. The same word she had thrown around so carelessly while rolling around with another man. I wasn't stupid. She didn't love me. She loved control. She loved comfort. And now that both were slipping away, she was scrambling. I took a deep breath and sent the only response she would get from me. Me, 10 a.m., you love me? Prove it. Sign the divorce papers. I could almost hear her screech through the phone. The text stopped for a while after that, which meant only one thing. She was furious. I turned off my phone and leaned back in my seat, allowing myself the first real smile in days. Emily had played a game, thinking she would win, but in the end, she lost everything. The moment I sent that final text, a strange peace settled over me. I had thrown the first punch, and Emily was stumbling, reeling from a reality she never saw coming. I imagined her pacing through the hollow shell of our home. No clothes, no jewelry, no husband to manipulate. Just empty rooms and burnt ashes where her double life used to exist. I left my phone on the bedside table of my hotel room, letting her messages pile up while I took a shower, washed off the weight of years spent in the shadow of a woman who never deserved me. By the time I checked my phone again, the silence was gone. Emily, 11:02 a.m. Josh, I swear to God, you are blowing this out of proportion. Emily, 11:15 a.m. You're acting like I cheated. I didn't. I was honest with you. I wanted to talk about opening our marriage. Emily, 11:30 a.m. Fine. You want a divorce? Let's talk about how we're splitting things. I'm not leaving with nothing. Emily, 11:45 a.m. Oh, I see what you did. You took the money, didn't you? That's low, Josh. Real low. Emily, 12:10 p.m. You think you can just destroy my life and walk away? You think this is over? I laughed, shaking my head. She was unraveling, and it was delicious to watch. For once, she was the one who felt powerless. I didn't reply. Instead, I went out, grabbed a cup of coffee, and watched the world move around me like nothing had changed, because for the world, nothing had. But for me, everything was different. Emily's perfect little kingdom was crumbling, and the best part? I wasn't done yet. The moment of reckoning. By noon, my lawyer confirmed that she had been served the divorce papers. I imagined her fury, her disbelief, the way her fingers must have trembled as she held the documents. Did she think she could sweet-talk her way out of this? Cry a few fake tears? Convince me that I was being unreasonable? Too bad. She had already played her hand. Then came the inevitable. My phone rang. I let it buzz for a while before answering. What? Josh. Her voice was tight, controlled, but I could hear the edge of panic beneath it. Can we just talk? Face to face? I could already picture her sitting somewhere, running a hand through her hair, trying to figure out what version of herself would work on me. The soft, wounded wife? The angry, wronged woman? The seductive manipulator? I don't see the point. My voice was flat. Sign the papers. Josh, please. Don't do this like some cold-hearted bastard. We've been together for 8 years. Do you really want to end it like this? I leaned back in my chair, considering her words. She wanted a conversation? Fine. I'd give her one. Meet me at the diner on 5th in an hour, I said, then hung up before she could respond. The final performance. The moment I walked into the diner, I spotted her in the corner booth. She had dressed for this, her hair styled, makeup subtle but perfected, wearing a soft blue blouse I had once told her she looked beautiful in. Pathetic. I slid into the booth across from her, meeting her eyes with an expression as cold as stone. Talk. Emily sighed, biting her lip. Josh, I know you're hurt, but you have to understand. I never meant to betray you. I let out a sharp laugh. Oh, saying it was my first time trying a dark Johnson, and I want more wasn't betrayal? I leaned forward. Do you know what it felt like to hear those words come out of your mouth? To know my wife was bragging about another man behind my back? Her face paled, but she recovered quickly. I was going to tell you. I wanted us to have an open conversation. I tilted my head. You mean after you had already done it? After you decided my feelings didn't matter? She exhaled sharply. Josh, I love you. I never wanted to lose you. She hesitated, choosing her words carefully. I wanted more. There it was. The truth, finally slipping through her teeth. I let the silence stretch between us, watching her fidget. You don't love me, I said finally. You love what I gave you. Stability, devotion, a safety net while you chased your little thrills. Her jaw clenched. That's not true. I pulled out my phone, scrolling through the screenshots I had taken from her laptop. Emails, messages, every single filthy, humiliating detail of her affair. I placed the phone in front of her. Explain these, then. Her face drained of color. Her hands trembled as she swiped through the messages, her own words staring back at her like a ghost from the grave. For a moment, she was speechless. Then, she did what she did best. She lied. Josh, these are old. Her voice was barely a whisper. I stopped seeing him. I leaned back, laughing bitterly. Wow, you really can't help yourself, can you? She snapped, her mask slipping. What do you want from me, Josh? An apology? Fine. I'm sorry. I'm sorry I wanted something more than missionary once a week. I'm sorry I needed more excitement. I'm sorry I found it somewhere else because you sure as hell weren't giving it to me. There she was. The real Emily. I smirked. And now you have nothing. Her eyes widened. What? You heard me, I said, standing up. I took the money. I took the house. You get nothing, Emily. Nothing but the consequences of your own choices. Her breath hitched. Josh, wait. But I was already walking away. As I stepped outside, the weight of everything lifted off my shoulders. She had played me for a fool for years. But now, she was the one left begging. And I was finally free. Josh stepped out of the diner, inhaling deeply as the crisp afternoon air filled his lungs. The weight that had been crushing his chest for days was lifting, piece by piece, as he walked away from Emily for the last time. Behind him, through the glass of the diner window, he could still see her sitting there, frozen, her manicured fingers gripping the edge of the table like it was the only thing keeping her together. He didn't turn back. Not for her. Not for her lies. The street was alive with the usual chaos of the city. Cars honking, people rushing by, oblivious to the fact that a marriage had just been reduced to ashes inside that diner. But for Josh, the noise barely registered. His mind was already moving forward, untangling itself from the mess that had been his life for the past 8 years. Emily had always thought she was the mastermind, the one in control. She had spent years weaving lies, manipulating situations, twisting reality to fit whatever excuse she needed. But she had underestimated him. She had assumed he would crumble, beg, fight for her. She had assumed wrong. As Josh walked to his car, a thought struck him. Emily wasn't done. Not yet. She was a cornered animal now, and cornered animals did desperate things. He had seen it in her eyes just before he left. The way her expression had flickered from panic to fury. The realization that her safety net was gone, that she was completely and utterly alone. And Emily? She couldn't handle being alone. Josh slid into the driver's seat, gripping the steering wheel as he thought about his next move. He had already drained the accounts and secured the divorce papers. The house was empty, stripped of anything she could use to hold onto their past life. But he knew Emily well enough to understand that she wouldn't go down without a fight. His phone vibrated on the passenger seat. He glanced at the screen. Unknown caller. He already knew who it was. Letting it ring, he exhaled slowly, debating whether to answer. Finally, he picked up, bringing the phone to his ear. At first, there was silence. Then, a shaky breath. Josh. Not Emily. Her mother. Marissa. His voice was flat, emotionless. What the hell is going on? Her tone was sharp, accusatory. Emily just called me, sobbing, saying you left her with nothing, that you're punishing her for. Josh's grip on the steering wheel tightened. For what? Marissa hesitated. For making a mistake. Josh let out a bitter laugh. Is that what we're calling it now? A mistake? She said she wanted to talk to you about opening things up, Marissa continued, her voice taking on that familiar, condescending tone she always used when she thought she could manipulate a situation. She was honest with you, wasn't she? That counts for something. Josh clenched his jaw. Emily had always been her mother's perfect little girl, incapable of doing wrong, always the victim, always misunderstood. Of course Marissa would defend her. She was honest after she cheated, Josh corrected, his voice cold. Not before. Not when it actually mattered. Marissa sighed heavily. Look, I know you're upset. Josh cut her off. I don't need your sympathy. I don't need your lectures. And I sure as hell don't need your approval. He exhaled, his patience wearing thin. If Emily wants to talk, she can do it through my lawyer. We're done here, Marissa scoffed. You're really going to throw away 8 years of marriage over this? Josh's entire body tensed. Over this? Over the lies? Over the betrayal? Over the humiliation of knowing his wife had been sneaking around behind his back while he had been breaking his back trying to build a future for them. His fingers flexed against the steering wheel. You know what, Marissa? His voice was calm. Too calm. I used to wonder why Emily turned out the way she did. But now, I get it. She learned from the best. Silence. Then, Marissa gasped. Excuse me? Josh ended the call before she could say another word. He tossed the phone onto the passenger seat, exhaling sharply. His hands were shaking. Not from sadness. Not from regret. But from the sheer rage boiling beneath the surface. It was incredible, really. Even now, Emily and her mother were twisting the story, painting him as the bad guy, as the villain who had abandoned his wife. As if Emily hadn't been the one to destroy everything first. But that was the difference between them. Emily and Marissa lived in fantasy. Josh? He was rooted in reality. And the reality was simple. Emily had lost. She had lost her cushy life. She had lost his love. She had lost every ounce of control she thought she had. And she knew it. Josh took another deep breath, trying to steady himself. He needed to be smart about this. Emily was dangerous when she felt cornered. And now, without money, without security, without him, she was the most dangerous she had ever been. He didn't put it past her to pull some stunt. Maybe she'd cry to her friends, spinning some sob story about how he had abandoned her. Maybe she'd try to get revenge in some way, filing some false accusation or playing the victim to anyone who would listen. Josh needed to be 2 steps ahead. Grabbing his phone, he sent a message to his lawyer. Me, 1:45 p.m. Emily is spiraling. Be ready for anything. Then, he turned the key in the ignition, pulling out of the parking lot. He wasn't just walking away from Emily. He was burying her. And when she finally realized it, it would be far too late. Josh drove aimlessly through the city, his fingers tapping against the steering wheel as his mind raced. The conversation with Marissa had left a bad taste in his mouth, but he wasn't surprised. That woman had spent years enabling Emily, feeding her delusions, making her believe she was entitled to anything she wanted, without consequence. And now that the consequences had finally arrived, they were scrambling to twist the narrative. He had to be ready. Josh pulled into the parking lot of a small cafe, ordering a black coffee before settling into a corner booth. He needed to think, to plan his next move. Emily wasn't done. Not by a long shot. He could feel it in his gut. The same gut instinct that had warned him something was off long before he actually caught her. He had ignored it then. He wouldn't make that mistake again. As he sipped his coffee, his phone vibrated. Another message from his lawyer. Lawyer, 2:10 p.m. Got the documents filed. She has limited legal options. But be careful. If she tries something reckless, we'll need to respond fast. Josh smirked. That was the only thing Emily had left. Reckless, desperate moves. And she had just played her next one. His phone buzzed again. Unknown number, 2:15 p.m. Josh, it's Mark. We need to talk. Call me. Josh's eyes darkened. Mark, the so-called friend Emily had been sneaking around with. The man whose name had been attached to all those filthy messages. What the hell did he want? Josh exhaled sharply, his fingers tightening around the phone. He considered ignoring it, letting the coward sit in silence. But then, curiosity got the better of him. He took a breath, then called the number. Mark answered immediately. Josh, his voice was tense. Look, man, I know I'm probably the last person you want to hear from, but you'd be right about that, Josh cut in coldly. So make it quick. There was a pause. Then, Mark sighed. Emily is losing it, he admitted. She came to my place an hour ago, completely unhinged, crying, screaming, saying you destroyed her life. Josh stayed silent, waiting. She was threatening to, I don't know, do something crazy. She kept saying she'd make you regret everything, that she'd find a way to take you down. Josh's jaw clenched. Of course she was. Why are you telling me this? He asked, voice sharp. You didn't give a damn about me when you were screwing my wife? Mark exhaled. Because she's dangerous right now, man. She's not thinking straight. I think she might do something to hurt you. Josh leaned back in his seat, eyes narrowing. Hurt me? Mark hesitated. Or herself. Josh's stomach twisted, but he forced himself to stay composed. He knew Emily, knew how she operated. And if she was really spiraling, then she was about to pull the biggest stunt yet. Where is she now? Josh asked. Mark exhaled sharply. She left. Said she was going to fix things. I don't know what that means, but, Josh, I think she's coming for you. Josh ended the call without another word. His mind was already working, piecing everything together. Emily wasn't the type to go quietly. She thrived on drama, on control, on manipulation. And now that she had nothing left, she was going to force him into a situation where he had to engage. That's what this was. A trap. Josh knew there was only one way to handle this. Stay ahead. He stood up, throwing some cash onto the table before walking briskly to his car. He wasn't going home. That would be too obvious. If Emily was planning something, she'd go there first. Instead, he drove straight to his lawyer's office. When he walked in, his lawyer, Greg, was already waiting, reading over the latest paperwork. He glanced up, raising an eyebrow. You look like a man expecting a war, Greg noted. Josh smirked grimly. That's because I am. He took a seat, exhaling. Emily's spiraling. She might try something reckless. I need to be legally untouchable when she does. Greg nodded, leaning back in his chair. All right, tell me everything. Josh laid it all out. The texts, the threats, the warning from Mark. When he was done, Greg exhaled sharply. She's desperate, he muttered. And desperate people make mistakes. He tapped his pen against the desk. We can preemptively file for a restraining order if things escalate. Josh considered it. Too soon. She hasn't done anything yet. Yet, Greg echoed. But she will. And when she does, we need to be ready to crush her. Josh nodded. He had spent years playing Emily's game. Now, she was playing his. As he left the office, his phone buzzed again. Emily, 3:45 p.m. I hope you're happy. You took everything from me. But I'm not done, Josh. Not by a long shot. Josh stared at the message, his lips curling into a cold smile. Let her come. Let her make her move. He'd be waiting. Josh sat in his car outside his lawyer's office, watching the dark clouds rolling in over the city skyline. The storm was coming, both literally and figuratively. Emily's last message played over and over in his mind, a desperate attempt to claw her way back into control. But she had lost that privilege. She had lost everything. His phone vibrated again, another message from Emily, but he didn't even look at it. He already knew what it would say. More threats, more manipulations, more attempts to paint herself as the victim. He had heard it all before, and he was done playing along. Instead, he focused on what really mattered, staying ahead. He started the car, driving with purpose, but he wasn't going home. His instincts screamed that Emily had one last move left, one final desperate play. And whatever it was, she wouldn't do it from the shadows. No, Emily was too dramatic for that. She wanted an audience. By the time he pulled into his driveway, the sky had darkened, heavy rain just waiting to pour. He stepped out of the car, tension in every muscle, and scanned the area. Everything seemed normal. Too normal. Then he noticed it. The front door was slightly ajar. Josh's heart pounded as he stepped forward, pushing the door open slowly. The house was eerily silent. He had emptied it weeks ago, stripping it of any traces of his life with Emily, leaving only the bare essentials. And yet, the air felt wrong, like someone was waiting. And then he heard it, soft breathing. He turned the corner into the dimly lit living room, and there she was. Emily sat curled up on the couch, legs tucked under her, wearing a pathetic excuse for an apology expression. Tear-streaked mascara ran down her face, and her hair was a mess. But Josh knew better than to believe any of it. She looked up at him, her lower lip trembling. "You left the door open," she whispered. He crossed his arms. "No, I didn't." Her fake innocence cracked for a split second, then the tears started again. "Josh, please. I have nowhere to go." Josh let out a slow breath. There it was, the final act. The poor, helpless victim, abandoned and broken, desperate for another chance. It was all fake. He didn't move, didn't react, didn't give her what she wanted. "You need to leave," he said flatly. Emily let out a choked sob. "Please, just talk to me. I know I messed up, but you don't understand what I was going through. I was lonely, Josh. I was so alone in this marriage." Josh laughed, a hollow, bitter sound. "You were lonely? While I was working my ass off to give you a perfect life. You were sneaking around behind my back, and I'm supposed to believe you were the victim?" Her face twisted with frustration. The act was slipping. "Josh, don't do this," she snapped. "You don't have to be cruel." "Cruel?" His voice was sharp. "You think this is cruelty?" "No, Emily. Cruelty is lying to someone who trusted you. It's smiling to their face while you stab them in the back." She flinched, her fingers gripping the couch cushion. And then, just like that, the tears vanished. The sadness faded. Her true self finally came to the surface. "You think you're better than me?" she hissed, venom in her voice. "You think you're so righteous, so perfect? You're just a pathetic, bitter man who can't handle the fact that I wanted more." Josh exhaled slowly, shaking his head. "There it is." Emily's eyes narrowed. "What?" "The real you," he said simply. "The selfish, manipulative, lying cheater. You couldn't even pretend for 5 minutes." Her face flushed red with rage, and for a moment, she looked like she wanted to scream. But then, something shifted in her expression, something more dangerous. She smirked. "You think you've won," she said quietly. "You think you're so smart. But you forgot something, Josh." His body tensed. "What's that?" She stood up slowly, smoothing out her dress. "I still have options." Josh clenched his jaw. "What are you talking about?" Emily's eyes glinted with satisfaction. "You're about to find out." Then, before he could stop her, she pulled out her phone, dialed a number, and pressed it to her ear. 911, she said, her voice suddenly trembling with manufactured fear. "Please, I need help. My ex-husband. He's here. He broke into my house. He's threatening me." Josh's stomach dropped. The trap had been set. Josh felt his stomach drop as he realized what was happening. Emily's voice, quivering with manufactured fear, carried through the room like a dagger slicing through the last thread of his patience. She clutched her phone, her eyes locked onto his with a twisted sort of triumph, relishing the moment. "Please hurry," she whimpered into the receiver. I don't feel safe." The weight of those words pressed down on him, suffocating. This was it, her final, desperate move. She had lost everything, and now, like a rabid animal backed into a corner, she was willing to drag him down with her. Josh had spent months unraveling her web of deception, but she had one last thread left to pull, playing the victim. His mind raced. Every instinct screamed at him to react, to shut her down, to demand that she admit the truth. But that's what she wanted. She thrived on chaos, on emotional explosions. If he took the bait, she would twist it, reshape it, turn it into a weapon against him. No, he wouldn't give her that power. Instead, he reached into his pocket and pulled out his phone. His movements were slow, deliberate. His thumb hovered over the screen for a moment before pressing the record button. Emily's expression flickered, just for a second, a crack in the facade. She hadn't expected that. Josh took a step back, his voice steady despite the storm raging inside him. His breath was controlled, his words precise. "Emily," he stated, keeping his tone measured, "you entered my house without permission. You called the police and falsely claimed I was a threat to you. Everything you're saying is being recorded." The moment those words left his mouth, the game shifted. Her eyes darted between his phone and his face, calculating. The sirens in the distance grew louder, cutting through the tension. Time was running out, and she knew it. For a brief second, there was hesitation in her stance. She was weighing her options, considering whether to double down on the lie or cut her losses before it was too late. Josh could see the wheels turning in her mind, trying to gauge just how much damage he could do to her if he sent the recording to the authorities. Then, just like that, the performance ended. She let out a dramatic sigh and pressed a button on her phone, ending the call. The trembling voice, the tears, it was all gone in an instant. Her shoulders relaxed, and her lips curled into a smug smirk. "I changed my mind," she said nonchalantly, tossing her phone onto the couch like none of it had happened. Josh exhaled slowly, shaking his head. She was unbelievable. This was who she really was. Manipulative, calculating, always playing a game. And yet, the moment she realized she might lose, she retreated like a coward. "You just tried to have me arrested," he said, his voice laced with exhaustion rather than anger. He wasn't even shocked anymore, just tired. Emily shrugged. "Oh, don't be so dramatic." She leaned against the couch, her fingers lazily running through her hair. "I was upset. You made me act out." Josh clenched his fists. She was unreal. "You're insane," he muttered under his breath. She smirked. "And yet, you still fell for me once." That was the final straw. Josh's patience had limits, and Emily had stomped all over them for far too long. He turned toward the door and pointed. "Get out." For the first time that night, real irritation flickered across her face. "Excuse me?" "You heard me," he said firmly. "Get out of my house, Emily. We're done. For good." She didn't move right away. Instead, she watched him, as if trying to figure out whether he was bluffing. Then, she laughed, a soft, bitter chuckle. "You think you've won?" she sneered, stepping closer. "You think this is over? You have no idea what I'm capable of." Josh didn't flinch. He didn't react. He just stared at her, unshaken, unbothered. And that, more than anything, seemed to infuriate her. Emily had always thrived on control. She had manipulated, lied, and twisted everything to suit her needs. But now, she had lost, and she knew it. Her lips pressed into a thin line. With an exaggerated sigh, she grabbed her purse and sauntered toward the door. She hesitated at the threshold, one last attempt at asserting dominance. "You'll regret this," she warned. "I could have made your life hell, Josh, but you just had to push me, didn't you?" He exhaled, his patience nearly gone. "Emily," he said calmly, "just leave." For a moment, she looked like she might say something else, but then, with a sharp huff, she turned and stepped outside. The door slammed shut behind her, rattling the walls. And just like that, she was gone. The weight on Josh's chest didn't lift immediately. He stood there for a long moment, staring at the closed door, letting the silence settle in. Then, finally, relief. It was over. Really, truly over. Emily had tried everything. Manipulation, deceit, emotional warfare. She had played every trick in her arsenal, but none of it had worked. Josh had seen through every lie, countered every move, and in the end, she had nothing left. She had lost. And for the first time in a long time, he felt free. The storm outside had finally broken, heavy rain pounding against the windows, washing away the remnants of a chapter that had been long overdue for its ending. Josh took a deep breath and sat down on the couch, running a hand through his hair. He didn't feel happy, not yet, but he felt lighter. He felt done. He didn't know what the future held, but one thing was certain. Emily was no longer a part of it. And that was enough.